We're back. Now, it's currently like 8 a.m. So, probably gonna keep the volume down a little bit. My roommate might be sleeping. And so I might have a little bit of a calmer demeanor in this video. This video is gonna be a little bit longer than my usual videos. I have so many updates. As I was writing the notes for this video last night, I was so surprised at how much I had to write. It took me an hour and 40 minutes just to write everything down, which is a little bit wild. So let's not even waste any time. And we just started a company together and just like that. And that company is called Micropay. So what this company does is that it solves the following problem. It solves the current issue that people have paying for subscriptions or bulk purchasing credits on SaaS products, and they don't fully take advantage of those subscriptions or those bulk credits that they bought. And what we do is that we allow them to never spend more than what they use. And we also, on top of that, make it anonymous, so you don't have to even sign up, you don't have to even log in. You could just spend whatever you need to use, and that's it. Super frictionless, very, very low barrier of entry. The last time I made a video, I think, was 4 months ago. And 4 months ago was November, and that was 2022. At that time, I had not actually launched our prototype I shouldn't say prototype, we hadn't launched our V1 of Micropay, which was our DALL-E 2 image generator. And we were, I think, in the process of making it. So let me just give you guys some updates on that. So the update from the last video, I think I had mentioned that we had applied to A16Z, some crypto accelerator, as well as Wolf NYC, which was another Lightning accelerator. We decided actually not to apply to those accelerators. And the main reason was that we just had this idea that it's probably best to get product market fit before we get funding. I've heard stories where people get funding and they basically waste all their money and all their time building a shit product and not really having any progress and just wasting their 20s away building a company that's destined to fail. And that's something that Dillian and I just did not want to do. And so after discussing that, we decided not to apply at that point specifically. And so the most important thing was to just focus on rapid prototyping, which was just building features, releasing it to people, getting people's feedback, and iterating on that. And that's just been our main objective now. And you'll see a little bit, I'll expand on that a little bit as we continue. So as I mentioned before, last video we hadn't launched, but a few weeks later we actually did launch. We added a free functionality to the image generator. So just for anybody that didn't watch the last video, I have a company called Micropay with my co-founder Dillian, and what we did was that we created this pay-per-use and anonymous version of DALL-E 2 that uses Bitcoin Lightning. And so what we did was that we realized that after the first 1,000 people came on, we found out that it's pretty good. It was pretty good traffic. However, it died down very, very quickly. So we offered this free functionality. So it's for people to be able to generate images using Stable Diffusion for absolutely free. And the launch, we launched on Product Hunt, and it pretty much flopped. It was a good lesson. I sort of saw that coming to some degree, but yeah, it flopped. So we still have a regular set of users that use the product every single day. We get about 5 to 10 orders. A lot of them are free, but then some of them are paid. We still haven't gotten nearly the amount of orders that we had gotten in the first wave of users when we first released the prototype. And currently V2, version 2 of Micropay, is in the works, creating a more functional and versatile experience by allowing people to share their photos, their generations, as well as allow for bulk purchasing. because every single time you had to buy something, before you had to always have to scan the QR code, but now you just, if you want, you could just bulk purchase it. And yeah, so let's just talk about some lessons that we learned from creating our first prototype for our startup. Number one is the fact that we even called it a startup and a company, and just calling it the brand of MicroPay, creating a logo, doing all these things. I think we did it too quickly. And the reason why is because we didn't make sure that all of our assumptions were completely valid before we started building on top of it. What we realized is that we actually built a foundation on shifting sands. We had imagined that we could potentially create a micropayment product for virtually everything. We can micropaymentize small business tools, or we can micropaymentize all AI tools. We thought that we can create just eat up the entire industry, but just make it micropayments oriented. But the one false assumption, or the one assumption that we had, was that paying per use on the spot with Lightning was the best option, and it was what the market would want, assuming that they had Lightning. And that's actually not what the market wants. There's three types of micropayments. There's prepay, meaning that you have to bulk purchase $10 in credits and then pay like 2 cents per transaction. There's, I don't know what the middle one's called, but just like you pay as you go, just directly. So every single transaction you have to pay the 2 cents. And then there's the third one, which is the most competitive one, meaning that it's best for the user, which is called post-pay. And post-pay means that you allow the customer to not pay anything at all, and just to use your product until they get to a certain threshold, and then you charge them. And that's what's currently been happening. Users use a service for, let's say, a month, and then at the end of the month they charge them like $2, $3 or $5 or $10, however much has been used. And that's currently what's happening, for example, with DALL-E 2's GPT-3. So I just found that so interesting, that the post-pay fiat system is actually more competitive than what we're doing. And most people aren't even on Lightning, so what are we even doing? And so there's this disillusionment of, like, it doesn't make sense to micropaymentize a bunch of things, especially micropaymentizing the small business tools. Businesses are not going to switch over to Lightning if they can see a post-pay fiat option. It's way better. And pay as you go, though. So remember, pay as you go, this concept of pay per use or pay as you go, is not by any means invalid. That's completely good. It's way better than a monthly subscription. So that's the part where we got right. The problem is that the pay as you go with Lightning is the problem. You could just have a pay as you go that's post pay. See what I'm saying? And so that was one of the lessons that we learned, like main lessons. Lightning will start to become more popular as things get integrated into the browser. So once we have Lightning wallets integrated directly in the browser, that's when things will get interesting, because it will allow people to do many things that they can't currently do right now, such as like sat streaming, like watching videos for like a small fee every single time. It will allow people to anonymously do things without needing to have like an identity in a database and stuff like that. So all this privacy stuff is going to be very useful, but like much later in the future, it seems. So once it's integrated into our hardware or into our browser, into the web. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the main thing that we are focused on is just making sure that we're getting to product market fit before we brand ourselves or really just commit too much to anything. And so I think that, at least from my perspective, I sort of consider what we're doing almost as indie hacking rather than creating a company or working on a startup. So like the whole title of that last video, hopefully it doesn't change, but I had called it, I started a tech company. It's not really accurate. I'm actually just indie hacking. And what that means is we're just creating random products that we think will work until one actually works, and then that becomes the startup. And that's the most accurate and accurate way of putting it. So we had a whole bunch of ideas after this. So let's talk about like the progression, because this is where things actually now get interesting. Things get interesting now because we had a whole range of things that we wanted to create. And one of the things that came in our head was we wanted to create B2B tools, because those actually have a very high chance of getting product market fit. Because rather than just trying to satisfy a consumer need, you're trying to satisfy a business need. There's a process by which you go from ideation to final product. And the inefficiencies that exist between this line is the problems that you're going to be trying to fix. That's what I mean by B2B tools or solving engineering problems. And the reason as to why they have high chances of product market fit is because we already know that people are using a certain process to do something. And if you can ever make that process more efficient, right, or save time or money, then automatically they just have to plug it in to their normal pipeline, and that's it. Automatically it gets product market fit. So with that being said, we thought maybe we can create something called a Lightning Network API. And that's very interesting, because for most people that don't know, the Lightning Network is a very, very complicated thing at the moment, where the only way to actually pay, so this is pretty wild, right? Like the only way to pay is by having your own Lightning Network node. And to have your node, you have to actually go and get like a piece of hardware that downloads the entire Bitcoin blockchain, and you're basically a node on the network that is able to broadcast and send transactions. And so that's very, very complicated, because not everyone's going to go and get their own server. This is very, very similar to like connecting to the internet. The only way you're connected to the internet is not by running your own like server. You're connected to an ISP, and they have their own servers. And so that's what we were planning on doing. We were planning on becoming a interface between the people that wanted to pay with Lightning and the people that actually received Bitcoin Lightning transactions. So in both cases, or actually I shouldn't say that, that's actually not accurate. What we actually wanted to do was become the Stripe of Bitcoin Lightning. So imagine, this is the premise of Stripe. Imagine you're creating an online business and you're selling a product and you want to sell it online. Now, you don't know how to build a website, so you just go on WordPress or Wix or Squarespace and you just go build a website. Great. Now the other problem is, like, how do you accept payments? Do you like put up your PayPal? Do you know, like, it's almost like, how do you do that? And Stripe solves this problem by taking all the complex machinery of payments and putting it all into one really nice API. Or not even just an API, just a separate link that you just serve to the user, and when they click on that link, they get redirected to Stripe's checkout page, and then that's it. And it's very, very simple. And we were planning on doing something very, very similar, but with Lightning. Because a lot of merchants, we wanted to basically accelerate the amount of Lightning products that were made by allowing people to get on the platform or to accept Lightning payments faster. And that's what we did. My theory is that Shopify, for example, or all e-commerce stores in the past really exploded after something like Stripe came out, because they didn't have to figure out all this extra stuff when they could just plug into Stripe, right? So that was our thinking behind it. And our competitive advantage would be that we would actually have zero fees until maybe 10 years or 5 years from now, when we've actually gotten most of the network. But there's a flaw with this idea. The number one flaw is that a payment processor only becomes profitable after they process a certain volume of transactions. And the volume has to be really, really high. So if we're charging 0% until 10 years, we're going to be essentially making no revenue, which means that we're going to be heavily dependent on funding. And once we decide to charge 1%, let's say, or 0.5%, once we get, let's say, $1 billion going through our system every single year, 1% of $1 billion is $10 million per year. And it's going to take a while to get to the $1 billion transactions, right? So $10 million is not that much. So that's sort of how I was thinking about it. So that was the fundamental problem with the idea. And if we're not going to get revenue and we're going to spend so much time with zero revenue and all this funding, it's probably very, very risky to do this, given the fact that there's other competitors like Strike with a K in this space. But yeah, that was what we had planned to do. We had a sprint planned out and everything, and we were about to get started on it. But then what happened was we found out about the release of ChatGPT. Now, this is very interesting because we were about to get started on that project until we got exposed to this ChatGPT. Now, you know from the last video that before ChatGPT even had been conceived to the public, let's say, I was fascinated with GPT-3 and I was planning on doing things with GPT-3. So the fact that ChatGPT got released conveniently at the same time that I was just fascinated by GPT-3 and just experimenting on it was just beautiful, because I spent like 2 whole days just obsessing over ChatGPT, trying to understand all of the value that you can potentially get from it. And let's talk about some of that. So this is the next phase, almost between when we were about to start one product and then this sort of interrupted it. And I'll explain a little bit why. And I'll probably explain why right now. We realized that there's so much technology that's being released right now that if we were to spend 5-10 years risking that our company of this payments API if we're going to risk that it's going to not be successful, and we're going to dedicate 5-10 years to it, we might have completely missed other opportunities that could have made us way more money in 10 times faster time. And here's why. Let's talk about it. ChatGPT has been just the most unbelievable thing ever. When I say ChatGPT, I really just mean GPT-3 and just the whole GPT infrastructure. And the only reason as to why ChatGPT has made it more apparent is because of the conversational structure that it built within it, that it really, really allowed me to explore certain things that I never thought of exploring. And I never actually had formalized my findings from from GPT-3. So let's just talk about it. There's so many things that I'm so fascinated by that it just blew my mind. I think that the world from now on is going to just change. The most prominent factor, the most prominent and the most unbelievably life-changing thing that ChatGPT or GPT just in general brings to the table is being able to bring context to anything that you don't currently have context on. So what that means is that it can give examples to things that you're not familiar with. And I'll give you some examples. And maybe I might not, maybe I will put examples on the screen. Imagine that I have no idea how the construction industry works. And I just want to have a better understanding of what problems people have. Normally what I had to do was that I had to go to the actual construction site or just talk to people that work in construction along the chain of command, right? I have to understand how the people at the complete bottom all the way to the complete top, how all of them have problems. Now I have to conduct interviews, and a lot of interviews, right? And you could see how hours could be spent doing this just to collect information on what problems people have. And even if you try to see what problems people have, you have to make sure that you're asking the right questions so that you're not asking leading questions so that people don't give problems that don't really exist. And there's so much problems with the logistics behind this. See, instead you could just ask ChatGPT, what are the common problems that construction workers experience? And you could just see this, just like the whole 9 yards. And here's what's even crazier about it. You see these 10 things that I just mentioned, but you could just ask ChatGPT to expand on each of these and to give examples of those, like specific examples. And that is just unbelievable to me. Let's look at another example. Imagine I want to understand a certain term that I read about, such as the ad hominem fallacy that you learn in critical thinking class. It will just give you 5 examples of it. Just 5 real sentences that are very, very grounded, that give you a good example of what it is. In fact, you don't even need to read the definition of an ad hominem fallacy in order to understand it now, because instead of searching the definition, you could just say, give me 5 examples of this. So now instead of understanding it conceptually, you understand it intuitively. Another example, list 5 examples when it's useful to have a gun. And then that's the answers. Here's another example. Imagine you're trying to learn a word in your vocabulary, such as the word ostensibly. That's a word that I learned recently. And here's 5 sentences to describe that. So as you can see, that in and of itself is probably just life-changing on its own. Just the ability to list examples blows my mind. Okay. The next one is getting perspectives of places you've never been exposed to. So imagine, for example, I want to know the etiquette of a particular place that I want to go to, such as in Seoul, South Korea. So I look at this image of me asking, I'm about to land in Seoul, South Korea, what cultural etiquette should I be aware of? And it just gives you a whole list of things. And what's crazier is that you can actually ask follow-up questions. The next thing is what did I write here? It can give you perspectives of a particular statement on demand. Let me see. Oh, yes. Oh, I see. Okay, so just read this example. Interpret the following plan from the perspective of an engineer, an architect, an environmentalist, a student resident in a construction company. And this is the statement. There's currently news that there's a new building that's going to be built in Toronto. The purpose is yet to be currently known. And so from the perspective of the engineer, what do they think? They think of an opportunity. The perspective of the architect, they think of a way of creating something visually appealing. From the perspective of environmentalists, they think of raising concerns about the impact of the ecosystem and the natural resources. From the perspective of the student resident, they think of how they could provide additional housing for them. And then from the construction company, they could potentially think of how they can make profit. And that is the type of thing that you cannot previously get anywhere else as fast as you can get at ChatGPT. So everything I'm about to describe, so I have a whole list of things that I still have to get over. And bro, like I feel like this video is gonna be just like 2 hours or something. So everything I'm about to say has never been able to previously be done before. Take a look at this. What are the essential prerequisites in order to fully understand wave-particle duality? This is a concept that you learn in grade 12 physics. So it either says, and I basically say if there's no prerequisite, mention it, and if there's a prerequisite, outline each point in a new line. And it will just tell you a list of things that you need to know before you learn about wave-particle duality. Now, the reason as to why this is crazy is because a lot of people try to learn new concepts without actually understanding the fundamentals. And because it's such a huge jump to learn this concept, they actually feel less motivated to learn it. But what they don't realize is that there's a whole breadth of things that they have to understand first. And by asking ChatGPT, it gives it to you. Now, I tried to make sure that ChatGPT wasn't biased and didn't just always list examples to irrelevant things. And so what I did was that I gave an example where I said, what are the essential prerequisites to fully understand window cleaning? And it said, there are no essential prerequisites. Great. Have you ever, for example, wanted to know the difference between two things? Like, what's the difference between this and what's the difference between that? You can always ask Google for it, and likely the answers have always been given. But the space at which you can ask what's the difference between this and this is near infinite, because the number of permutations that can exist for a billion different topics is like so unbelievably huge. I can't even give you a number. I can't even say a trillion. It's way bigger than that. And so if I, for example, want to know something even small, like extremely small, like what's the difference between ECMAScript 5 and ECMAScript 6 of JavaScript? This is like some, obviously, software engineer talk. So anyone that's not a developer won't understand anything about JavaScript. But it'll give you the fine details between the two. And if you ever want to, for example, know the difference between this job and that job, it will be able to tell you. So for example, the other day I asked, like, what's the difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic? And it gives it to you, gives you the difference. And I know that one's a very common one, but just now extend that and extrapolate that to just something that's more obscure that you can't really get an answer from the internet. So that's another crazy thing that you couldn't have done before. Another thing that it can do, somewhat okay, not perfectly, is it's really, really good at determining argument validity. So if I create a deductive argument, and this whole concept of creating deductive arguments is very powerful, because if you create if the argument is logically correct and every single one of those statements are true, then that means the conclusion that you come up with has to be true. And that's what the definition of a deductive argument is. So here's the example of the deductive argument, and it tells you how it is flawed. And it gives you basically what your logical inconsistencies are, which is unbelievable, because in my opinion, at least from my life experience, I have realized that 95% of people actually are not very logically oriented. They make a lot of logical fallacies. They have a lot of ad hominem fallacies. They have false dichotomies. So there's a lot of problems that people have, and it's a result of not thinking logically. And if they're able to put their logic through ChatGPT, it can immediately give them where their flawed logic lies, which is so powerful. And this improvement, I think, is going to really change the world for the better, if used obviously correctly. Now, on the same frame of thinking, if it's able to understand things logically, it's also able to give you analogies to things that you just never understood before. So I've always, for example, tried to understand what eigenvalues and eigenvectors were, and I thought maybe I can ask for an analogy, and I searched up and it basically gave me an analogy for it. I can't give a really good example of this because eigenvalues and eigenvectors isn't really relevant to the general audience. So just think of any analogy that you wanted to understand, and it would be able to give it to you. It would be able to create stories on the spot, which is just unbelievable. So I asked it to give me a parable to explain short-term versus long-term thinking when building a company, and it just gives me a story. It just constructs it out of thin air. This has never been able to be done before, right? I could point out logical fallacies. Another thing. This is just an instructive example. Take a look at this one. This really blew my mind. I think I tweeted about this too. So I asked it to point out any logical fallacies I might have. So let's have a debate. We'll talk about minimum wage. And they basically made their case, and I said, well, look who's talking. You don't work minimum wage, so you wouldn't know what you're talking about. And so that's an ad hominem fallacy. And then when he said ad hominem fallacy irrelevant to the argument, then I said, so you're saying that minimum wage is going to double prices? And then he said straw man fallacy. I never said that, which is absolutely true. And then I said the experts that have studied this stuff have said that minimum wage should be increased, so that's that. And then they talk about how I made an appeal to authority. So I just got so excited just seeing this, because this has just never been done before. There's not many people you could talk to that could just tell you what fallacies you have, and let alone on demand, right? That's the thing that just blew my mind. The next thing that it can do is that it can give you the problems that every topic that you're learning about is trying to solve. So this is another concept of learning. Imagine that you're trying to learn about wave-particle duality again, which is, like I said, a grade 12 physics concept. And as you're probably hearing, you're probably like, why do I even need to know this? Why do I even need to learn this at all? And what you can do is that you could just ask that to ChatGPT. You could say, what real-life problems are even being solved with understanding wave-particle duality? And by knowing those answers, you could just know whether it applies to you. So let's look at this example. Let's just see what it said. In quantum mechanics, engineering, medical imaging, communications, and biology. And so if any of these examples don't apply to you, then it's probably not worth looking at or studying, right? It's really fascinating to see that it's able to give you that context. The other thing that I had probably mentioned before that it does very powerfully is this concept of being able to go down the rabbit hole. Usually when you search things on the internet, you have to search things individually, one answer at a time. So once you get the answer, then you go to the next answer. An example could be, when was the CN Tower created, right? And it gives me the answer, 1976. But then what happens if I want to find the story behind its construction? I have to spend a little bit more time researching. But then I could just ask ChatGPT instead. I could say, what was the story? And it'll just give it to me, right? And then I would say, who's the head architect? I have to search that separately. And then it would say John Andrews, etc. And then I ask about John Andrews' story, and then I can literally just go down the rabbit hole. And that's another extremely powerful thing about this, because it understands the context. I don't have to re-explain the context. The understanding that I've basically had based off of what I've presented so far is that any time that you spend searching online is all wasted. Any time spent searching whatsoever is a waste. Even if you're looking for files, it's a waste. AI should be able to know exactly what you're looking for and be able to find it. Full stop. It can give you, and it can also explain why every single thing happens. So if I, for example, ask, why are humans so selfish? It gives you a whole list of interesting things. And I can expand and I can be like, oh, so why is individual success, I think that's point number 2, why is that highly encouraged? And then it will just give you the reason. And then you can just have a very, very strong foundation. So everything that I just mentioned are breakthroughs in understanding, just with ChatGPT. There are so many more things, like breakthroughs in business, which I'm not going to go so deep into now, but I just wanted to mention like the personal aspects of things in terms of understanding that it just really, really impacted on me. But I'll just list out the business ones just without giving any examples. It can give you good advice given your situation. So you could just describe your situation of where you're at in your business. It could just give you advice. It can act as a role play partner. So if you ever, for example, want to practice talking to people, it can act as the other side. If it can list out potential business opportunities and problems, which is really wild. And it can also give you use cases to give you context of the topic. It can figure out who your user groups might be, and it can actually evaluate your business ideas. So I will probably give an example of this one. Let's see. Actually, you know what? Like, it's too long. Never mind. Okay, great. So that's done from that side. Let's talk about the weaknesses that ChatGPT pretty much had. It obviously has a bias in the sense that it will always give you an answer unless you tell it not to, and you have to. And it's not really clear how to adjust its confidence interval as to whether it drops below a certain percentage, then say I don't know, and if it's ever above a certain percentage, then you give the answer. So there's no clear metric to adjust there. That's the one problem. The other problem is that it can't really understand deeply what assumptions you have. So it can only understand surface level assumptions. And then the other thing is that it can't make calculations at the moment. Now, everything that I just mentioned could actually be solved. And they could be solved with fine-tuning, it could be solved with chaining, and it could be solved with programmatic AI. What I mean by that is just combining the GPT process with just like code. So if you ever wanted to make calculations, you could just have it put in the calculation into a Python terminal or a Python script, and then it gives you the output. Great, so that was ChatGPT. Unbelievable, right? So let's actually talk about the extension of what's happening here. My thinking is that based off of all the things that I just described, the rate of productivity is going to increase so dramatically that we're going to eventually get to a point where AI gets so good that it's virtually able to replace every single job possible. Now, the reason as to why I came to this conclusion is because I actually tried doing the opposite. In fact, I was very skeptical. I had a friend that asked me, what could I do with this whole AI thing? is my job going to get automated? And I initially was like, no, like it's a naive prompt to completion algorithm. It's not, it's just doing copying. It's just so good at copying you can't even tell that it's copying. But then as I tried to really think about it, I realized that everything we do is just output related. So there's not a single thing that's valuable today that's not output related. What I mean by that is, imagine, for example, like let's list any task that AI can't do. Okay, let's assume AI can't be a sales rep because it can't deal with the specific types of questions that it can be asked. At the end of the day, only thing that the AI needs to do is just be fine-tuned to the task. So you can give it examples of the right way of doing things, give it 1,000 examples of that, and it'll be able to know exactly how to respond to all types of questions based off of the framework of what to do. Another thing that I thought about was like AI can't do research because it doesn't understand what it's looking for. But what happens if you train it on what it should look for? Right? Like fine-tuning solves all of these problems. You could then say like AI can't be nurses. AI can't do X. AI can't do Y. Like physical tasks. Yeah, physical tasks at the moment aren't possible. But what happens if multimodal AI models come out, where it's not text-based, it's a mixture of both text, image, audio, all of it all together, so that an AI robot with actual limbs, with maybe multiple limbs that are probably more gentle than a human being, will be able to do the job of a nurse way better than a nurse can, without any strain on the nurse. And it could do it forever, and it doesn't have to pay him as much, right? And it can look at the person and know that that's a person, and it knows that if we tell it to turn its foot this way, it'll know exactly what that means, right? That is all possible in the next 10 years. And that is very, very crazy if it's possible, right? This concept of being able to fine-tune and create essentially AI agents is unbelievable. So let's talk about AI agents for 2 seconds, because it's a little bit more complicated than it sounds, and it's a little more fascinating than it sounds. Currently, right now, AI, what it does is that it automates tasks. So you tell it to recognize an image, it can recognize the image for you. You tell it to recognize some writing, it does that for you. Now, what GPT-3 has allowed is to allow people to create tasks, allow AI to automate more complicated tasks, such as write me an essay, determine an analysis of this event, etc. So now the breadth of expertise has now just increased, but that's still task-based. Imagine if you can make an AI objectives-based. So what you do is that you say, I want this done. And I'll give you an example. I want to get a job. Find me the right people to message, and message those people to get the job. I shouldn't even say message. I want to get a job. Set up an interview with me, for me. Set up an interview for me. And what it will do is it will know on its own the best ways to go find people that are recruiters or people that work in companies, know how to talk to them, know how to follow up with them, know how to set up the interview, and know how to notify you back. It'll just do this all on its own. So it's not task-based. It does a bunch of tasks all on its own, and it's able to strategically determine which tasks to do, all wrapped under one objective. And that is unbelievable. That is like creating an employee, but that's just completely AI based. And that is so crazy, because when something becomes objectives based, that's when you get into automation of everything. Like true AGI will just come, where it just automates everything and everything is gone. And that makes me think about the world post AGI, assuming that it's the case. And OpenAI believes so, or at least suspects so, because apparently they are running the largest UBI experiment in the entire world. UBI meaning Universal Basic Income. And I was thinking about what are the effects of what happens if we actually have UBI. And UBI would be so interesting because people, for the first time, will no longer need to worry about survival. And what I mean by survival is bare bones survival. You will be able to wake up every morning and quite literally do what you want, which is crazy. Like, I find that so wild because people, for the first time, will be able to create companies for the sole purpose of just doing what they feel like doing and what they enjoy, rather than creating a company around a user. So they wouldn't be creating a company around solving a problem, but they'd create a business to do something for whatever they enjoy. And that's a very, very different shift. You see, the paradigm that we have for creating businesses is all circled around making profit. But similar to how the Maslow's hierarchy of needs of a human being has progressed over time, where a human throughout their lifespan will get enough money to live a comfortable life, and then they'll go up the ladder. I think for the first time we'll be able to go up the ladder of survival for companies' Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so there will be a very, very different paradigm of a company. And we will engage so differently with each other, I feel. And with no survival, I don't even know how the world would look like. My thinking is that it would be more positive. Everyone would immediately go from I need to make money to I want to know how to be fulfilled in life. And so I'm very, very curious as to what's going to happen. That's at least my assumption, that people are going to go from I want to make money to I want to be fulfilled. So I find that super interesting. I just love like where things are headed at the moment. So there's also like future technology at the moment, such as like liquid neural networks, where I probably shouldn't even mention it, just because I don't know if anyone even understands the real problem with fine-tuning. To summarize, fine-tuning actually happens in a batch process, and liquid neural networks is a technology that allows you to update your models as you collect data points, which is very, very similar sort of to what we do as human beings. We almost have like a hybrid. Okay, so that's the whole section of ChatGPT and just like the future of AI. Now let's continue on with the path of what we were doing. What we decided to do after finding out about all this technology was we were like, listen, we cannot work on this light network API. This is just not going to work because there's just so much tech out there. There's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity to make a lot of money right now that we could just prototype different products that are AI based. And we had a whole table, and I should probably show like a picture of this table. If I show it, I show it. If I don't, I don't. But this table is wild. And we had like, I think 30 or 40 ideas that we went through. And we just analyze the problem. We call it destroying the idea, where we try as hard as we can to make sure that the idea is debunked, to make sure that it can't succeed until it can, right? Until we are proven wrong ourselves that we actually indeed can't destroy the idea. So we try to find all the flaws, we try to see what problem it solves specifically, we try to find all the use cases. And if we're able to successfully list all these things and can't list any problematic flaws, then the idea has become anti-fragile. And what we had a few really, really good ideas, such as like something called knowledge-based AI, contract AI, customer service chatbot. These are all like things that I think that people will very, very quickly create. I'll just create, let me think, for the interest of time, Okay, what I'll do is I'll do the following. I'll very, very quickly explain what each of these are. Knowledge-based AI, the fundamental problem that it's solving is the following. Imagine you have a list, imagine you have like a list of laws to read. Let's assume the Residential Tenancies Act, which is in Ontario. It's basically what landlords should know about if they want to learn about the regulations of what laws they're allowed, what rights that they have, and what rights that the tenants have. Now, it's going to be very, very tedious to read the entire document, let alone after you have read it to memorize everything. So why can't you just instead ask questions to an expert that can give you answers about that document? Now imagine if that expert is just an AI, because the AI has just read the entire document already, so it could just give you answers based off the questions you ask. That's basically knowledge-based AI. And we basically did a test case with my building. We looked at our bylaws and we tried to ask it questions about our bylaws. But then we realized there's like inherent problems with this, which is that there's in order for this to be successful, there's a high dependence on accuracy. And what our intention was to create an out-of-the-box product where we don't actually have to do any manual work with people, where people could just download the product and just use it on its own. It's fully automated, end to end. But we realized there's a huge problem with structuring unstructured data properly, automatically. And there's a lot of iterating that needs to be done. So that was the problem with that knowledge-based AI. There's also some other problems that we haven't yet gotten to work on, such as like contract AI. Huge problems, for example, when you're reading a contract, you're not really aware of all the laws. And so what it could potentially do is read the entire contract for you and point out specific things that you should be aware of that aren't typically included in contracts, let's say, or what the average thing usually is. Like, let's assume when you're putting down, to take the same example for being a landlord, if you have to pay $200, the first $200 of every single repair that goes into the building, the contract could say, oh no, that's not true. Like, the average is actually like $10 or $50. It's not 200. This could be very, very useful for people. A customer service chatbot. This is a huge problem because I've had personal experience with extremely bad customer representatives at big companies like Instacart and Amazon. And I realized how big of a reputational risk there is that the actual customer service representatives hold on these companies. Like, they hold all of the reputational risk. And so there's an extreme focus on making sure that they do not do things that are going to damage the company. And because it's such a huge problem, AI seems to be able to manage that reputational risk much better than actual customers. And they're able to come off as more empathetic, and they're able to not get their willpower waned over time. And so it seems to me that that is a really, really big opportunity. Okay. So before I now move on to the next phase, I do want to check the time because I want to see how much time I've been spending. Okay, great. Yeah, we're like 45 minutes in, which is good. I think it's going to be another 45 minutes from here. Okay, so I just mentioned all these ideas, right? I mentioned how we had a whole list of things that we wanted to work on. And then mid-December happened. The World Cup started, I think, earlier. And it was just getting like really, really interesting. And I remember I was thinking to myself, like, damn, I was just thinking about my old days, like about how I used to play FIFA and about how it was so cool how I was able to control every single player and be able to have them coordinate the ball in a way where you can somehow score a goal. It's just so beautiful to me, in my opinion. And I just had this craving to play FIFA. And conveniently, I had the opportunity to buy a PS5 and I bought one. And it's so crazy what happened after, because as soon as I bought the PS5 and I brought it home, bro, like, I pretty much became like so addicted to it that I was playing like 8 hours a day, more than 8 hours, like 10 hours a day. There was times where if I didn't have work or if I didn't have anything related to the startup, I think that I would have played like 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week. Like it was so wild that there was one day where I woke up at 8 a.m., played all the way till 6 a.m. Do you understand what I'm saying? I played at 8 a.m. all the way around till 6 a.m. And then I woke up the next day and then played again, I think until the rest of the day. Like something crazy. It was so wild. Like I'm just so fascinated at how addicted I was. And I had all these games that I could have played. Like I could have played Call of Duty. I could have played oh man, there's so many games. I had Call of Duty, I had FIFA, there's like Fortnite, there was all the games that are on like the PS Plus store. There's I literally am forgetting all the games. But the point is that I had all these games that I could have played, but the main game that I played was FIFA. I mainly played FIFA. And I think the reason as to why I played it so much was many reasons. So let's talk about that. Number one was that, let me see. Number one was that I actually really, really enjoyed the whole structure behind it. There was this allure to actually play. The gameplay, just like playing itself was fun. Not only that, once you actually play, it gives you coins. And once you play enough times, you get packs, which gives you players. And when you get players, you can sell those players to get coins. And what you do once you get coins, you can buy better players. And then when you buy better players, you can use those players in your team. And then you win more. And by winning more, you get more packs. Those packs give you more players, to give you more coins, to give you better players, to get to play better games. So then the cycle continues. And I was just completely addicted to that. I also had this desire to get extremely good at the game. I had this feeling that I wanted to be extremely good. And I just was not satisfied with people scoring goals, or I was just not satisfied with losing. And then there was another side of things, which was that losing was a big problem with me. Like I would not stop playing until I absolutely felt satisfied with my wins, and that never happened. So I sort of felt a very similar tendency to like this gambling problem that I had, and I'll talk about that later. So I realized that after playing so much, that I probably need to understand this. Like I was meeting with Dillian, we had our stand-ups every single day, and then I told him like, listen man, I think I need like 1 month off, because I'm currently being completely bombarded with video games, like a video game desire or craving, and I don't want to just get rid of it. I want to actually understand this, because me doing what I want, me doing how my body feels like doing, without resisting, without doing anything I should be doing. This is stuff that I've talked about in previous videos. Me doing that without any resistance, I didn't want to just get rid of it. I wanted to see, why was I even attracted to this? And so I told him that I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm currently having resistance working, so that was fine. He actually was planning on going to India, which is pretty crazy, because as I had this problem, he went to go travel, so it was like perfect timing. So I spent some time trying to understand it, and I realized that all addictions, or all things that you get in the state of flow for, have a micro motivation and a macro motivation. So the micro motivation is like the small thing that allures you to actually go and like play it, even though there's nothing really motivating you in the macro. It's just like, for example, it just feels good, it sounds great, it looks visually appealing, whatever it is. Whatever that is, that's the micro. right? In the micro, it feels good. That's why eating, for example, snacks feels good. Micro motivation. The macro motivation is the thing that gets you going in the long term. For example, what kept me going was two things. What kept me going was I wanted to be a very, very good player. I wanted to, for example, get to a point of mastery in the game, which is pretty wild if you think about it, because you can go down that path of mastery forever. And if you combine this small feeling of micro motivation with this mastery mindset, it just leads me to play forever, right? There was also one more factor, which is classified almost like a micro/macro motivation, which is this feeling of not wanting to lose. And I had this really weird trap of if whenever I lost, I would want to not end it on a loss. I would want to win. But then once I would win, I would want to keep winning until I lost. But when I see the way in which I lost, I would want to not lose until I got a win. I would not want to end it on the win. And I would just keep flipping back and forth. So I realized that those are the sort of the problems that I had. These are the weird tendencies that I had. And I noticed that I don't actually beat myself up over a lot of things, except for moments where I lost, for example, in FIFA. And we'll talk about beating yourself up potentially as we talk about the gambling problem later on. So that was like my whole gaming addiction. I was very surprised that I had spent so much time just working completely focused, and then just randomly within, assuming obviously you see like there was no resistance, like I didn't really resist playing the video games. I didn't tell myself, oh, I should be working, so I'm going to work. As soon as it came, like I just allowed myself to play as much as I wanted. And I found that so interesting. And what's remarkable is that right after this desire to understand it, I decided to do an experiment. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see where all of my time goes now that all of it's been funneled into gaming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my PS5, I'm going to leave it at my parents' house. I'm going to spend 2 weeks just doing what I want. And I did that. And I just wanted to know whether I would go back to doing work-related things, like the startup, or indie hacking, I should say. And I ended up not doing that, which was a very good sign to me that there was other things that I wanted to take care of first. And so these are the following things. Let me see. The following things were, I started being a little bit concerned over my privacy. That was one thing. We'll elaborate on each one. I started wanting to reach out to like-minded people online, and I wanted to finish organizing everything that I had. There was a bunch of things that I had left on the back burner, like my files, organizing my files and my Notion and stuff like that I had never organized. And I felt this need to just organize everything and just have a clearer mind about things. So let's talk about those three things. Privacy concerns. I realized with the news that was happening these past few months, and just by doing more thinking about it, that most people are privacy conscious, meaning that they focus on encrypting their messages, encrypting their documents, making sure that no one can see their emails. All of that seems very paranoid from the outside. And the reason is because everyone that thinks that has a flawed assumption. And the flawed assumption is the following. The flawed assumption is, why do we need to worry so much about that when nothing's really going to happen and there's nothing to hide? But that's not the point. Even if you have nothing to hide, you could still get into trouble. Let's talk about why. So to frame this, I want to frame all of this under this one video I remember watching called "Don't Ever Talk to the Police." So I'm not going to explain it. I want everyone to just, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, if you really want to understand why I'm privacy conscious, like to a great degree, just watch this video. It's so great. It really distills it really well. And I'll put up the link. It's called "Don't Talk to the Police," and I'll show the thumbnail in case like the video link gets messed up. So, or like, yeah, if I don't show the link, just search that video. Don't talk to the police, or whatever it is that I just put on that picture. It's basically this lawyer explaining why you shouldn't talk to the police, even if you're innocent, and it's so true. So let's talk about the 3 different things that that people look out for when it comes to this type of thing. Imagine that you want to, for example, encrypt your messages. Great. So encrypting your messages could be because of 2 or 3 things. You could let's just say 2 things. Most people fear that it's because of government tyranny, that the government will eventually have leadership that will oppress their own citizens and will, or at least oppress a minority of their citizens, such as like McCarthyism, the thing that happened back then. And because of that, you need to hide from the government. That is possible, but not probable. Great. Now, there's another side of things that most people don't think about. And this is the side of things that I think more applies to me. But both of them, regardless, even if it happens, there's a problem with it being available, like with people being able to see it. So the first one's government tyranny, which is why people will want to be privacy conscious. The second reason is because of becoming a target, whether it's government related or non-government related. It could even be an organization that targets you, a person that targets you. So let's understand why someone would want to target you. From the stories that I've seen in the past, let's look at someone that has a huge target on their back. Let's talk about Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate has been a very famous individual. Now, he's in jail right now. And he's been in jail for, I think, 60-something days without even being charged for anything. He's just been detained, been put in the worst conditions possible, has limited contact with the lawyer, has had all of his assets seized, has been deplatformed on all platforms, all because he had controversial views. So I'm not saying that like Andrew Tate's in the wrong or in the right or anything like that. I have no horse in that race. All I'm saying is that when you have a target on your back, people will do anything that they can to try to either silence you or try to take from you or whatever. Just the act of being famous gives rise to people that are stalkers, gives rise to people that try to extort you, gives rise to people that try to kidnap you. So that's why I say that having a target on your back is an example of something that you have to really pay attention to. Another example of having a target on your back is being very outspoken or having unique views. An example of that are journalists. Journalists are extremely privacy conscious. And the reason why is because the people that they're talking about want to put a hit out on them. And there's been a lot of journalists that have unfortunately died, and they use all types of privacy apps. And that's the reason why, because there's a target on their back. Now, what I realized in my life is that I will eventually get to a situation where I will either have a leadership position, where I'll either be famous, or I will have very unique views such that people will not like it. And because I know I'm going to be in any of those categories, or all 3 of those categories, whichever one, I need to be privacy conscious. Now let's talk about the disadvantages of either of them, whether it's government tyranny or having a target on your back. If you had watched that video of Don't Talk to the Police, the main thing that's the problem, even if you're innocent or if you have nothing to hide, is that if people, and this really relates to the Andrew Tate thing, is that if people do not like you for whatever reason, they can misunderstand or take out of context data or files or whatever, or things that you've said in order to bring you down, or in order to do whatever, to cancel you, etc. I'll give you an example. Imagine, so right now I have all of my data on Toggle. They're on Toggle servers, and that's all. Sorry, I meant to say all my time data. So I track my time. I've been tracking my time for almost 5 years. And all of my time data is currently on Toggle servers. If an employee right now wants to go and check what I did Saturday night of July 29th, 2018, I don't know if it's Saturday night. That would be very crazy if it was Saturday night. But if it was Saturday of July 29th of 2018 at 7 p.m., 7:01 p.m., they'd be able to know exactly what I did. Okay, the problem with that is that information is very limited in my time entries. I could say something very, very brief that you might think, because of your bias of me, that you might think I'm talking about this, but I'm actually not talking about that at all. So imagine, for example, I am suspected for some reason of like terrorism, which obviously would never happen. But imagine I was just me being curious, right? I go and do research on like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, right? Me doing research on ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and I'm just curious on like, how does this even work, right? Trying to understand it. It can very easily conflate with me interested in being an Islamist or terrorist. And that is an example of how, if the US, for example, according to I think the Patriot Act, suspect you of being a terrorist, all of your rights are stripped and they can pretty much do whatever they want. And I'm taking a very extreme example, right? But my point is that the littlest thing can be taken completely out of context or can be conflated with what people suspect you of doing. And just like that, it's over. That can happen with your text messages, that can happen with your files, that can happen with your pictures. It's like, why is someone taking a picture of this? There's so much context, right, that's missing, that the misunderstanding or the false, there's certain things that I might say that actually might not be correct, right, on the time entries or on the pictures or whatever. Sorry, not pictures, on my voice memos, whatever it is, right? And that in and of itself could be misunderstood. That's my point. And the person that talks about like the don't talk to the police video, he explains it way better. So that was the reason as to why I wanted to, that's why I had this like privacy consciousness. Let me just do this. So that's why I had this privacy consciousness. Let's see. So given that, let us talk about the different things that I did, or at least the notable things that I did. I was thinking about all the data that I had, like time entries, passwords, location data, pictures, messages, voice memos, call history, notes, tasks, /thoughts, cache, search history, watch history, emails, heart rate and sleep data, etc. All of these things I just ranked in terms of like how important they are to me, and I tried to find mitigation solutions to it. And I did them for all of them except for some. So for example, like some of the things that I did was that I initially wanted a good storage solution. I realized all of it was on Google Drive, and I didn't want it to be on Google Drive. And so what I did was that I was thinking of getting a NAS, but then I realized that having a NAS might be too much of an upfront cost. You know, like getting like 1 terabyte drives, 4 of them, and then buying the NAS itself, and then focusing on maybe not, and then also this problem of the NAS being in one location and that risk and dealing with all that. I realized I could just pay $7 a month to Backblaze, and I can encrypt all of my data with a private key. And just like that, boom, I can do that, boom, done. The other thing was, for example, getting a cold card. So I transferred some money to Bitcoin and got a cold card, and I was extremely interested in the versatility of that card, by the way. that's a whole other thing. But I realized that if shit ever hits the fan, by being able to have a set of set of words in my head that I can memorize, I can literally carry like money wherever I want, which is really wild. So there's that concept of things for privacy. There's also the time entries. I haven't figured out a solution yet. I'm just gonna have to wait till a self-hosted or end-to-end encrypted solution comes out. For messages, I've basically moved most of my messages to either WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram. Yeah, so, and I've been downloading a lot of my data and just like encrypting it. Sorry. I have a shortcut, but if I just like click these 3 buttons, it just like plays a song randomly. Or the song I was listening to, at least at that point. So yeah, the other thing I was doing is I was trying to reach out to like-minded people online. Now, the thing that motivated me to do this was that I have an idea of who I want to surround myself with. I have like a very good idea, actually, and most of the people that I know of, as I had mentioned in the last video near the end, actually do not match this characteristic. The characteristic is the desire to pay attention, or I should actually be more specific. It's the desire to want to understand, or / the desire for truth. And the desire to really want to understand is a characteristic that's extremely rare in people. Extremely rare. And so what I wanted to do was find a bunch of people online and reach out to them. And I wanted to reach out to them now instead of later on when I'm more known or popular or whatever. Because I realized that if I'm more popular or known, or if I have a good job or a good successful startup or whatever, people actually will respond because of, or I shouldn't say that. There's a higher chance than if I were to be in this situation for people to respond because of my achievements rather than the words or what I'm asking, what I'm actually saying. So I realized that if someone had messaged me out of the blue, given my situation, and they had messaged something that gave me any indication that they just desire to understand, I wouldn't care about like where they're from. I would just do a whole fucking background check on them and just look at their website if they have one, and I would actually respond to them. I would message them. I would be the one to message them. Like, imagine if someone just followed me and that's it. I would just be super curious about who they are and just like go down the whole rabbit hole and message them, in fact. So if I knew that that's what I would do, and assuming that I also obviously am considering myself to pay attention, I'm considering myself to want to understand, me having that characteristic that desires clarity, then that means that if I go and follow people, or if I go and message people, that they, at least at the minimum, they should acknowledge the message or like have a conversation. And what I did was I went on like all these social media apps. I went on these apps and searched on the search bar people's bios, or at least for people's bios. I remember like in Clubhouse, people put a lot of things in their bios like a long time ago. And so I actually went on that app and searched up like keywords, like, I don't know, like first principles thinking, I don't know, like I just thought of like random things, like truth. I tried to find like clarity. I tried to find like specific words that not many people would use, and I wasn't very successful, to be honest. I couldn't find many people. I think I ended up like following 40 people and then messaging like 15. And out of the 40 people that I messaged only one of them followed back. So was interested in following back, even though my profile was public. So, which is good, because they didn't follow back just because they were curious, like just because they didn't see what my profile was. And then the other one was, after I messaged 15 of them, only one responded, which is pretty wild. So one responded. Out of 40 people, one basically had responded. Or sorry, 15 people, one had responded. And even then, I don't know, like, they weren't it. So it just made me realize, like, this is a little bit rare. And by the way, you have to remember that me following those 40 people, those are 40 people that I had filtered out of thousands of people that I had already thought were good candidates. I guess to, like, I'm thinking about it now, the best thing to have done is to just follow 1,000 people and see who follows you back. Because there's a lot of people that won't put anything in their bios, right? And that might actually desire clarity. So here's my point. All I wanted to do is I wanted to find like-minded people online. So I did this with Clubhouse. I went on Twitter. I did the same thing. I thought Twitter was pretty interesting because what you can do is that you can search all of the conversations that have been had in history, and that's way more telling than people's bios. And I think that in the future, because I tried doing it manually and it didn't work that well because there's so much noise to signal. I think that once embeddings happen, embeddings are a very, very interesting technology. It basically allows you to do semantic searching. So you search what you want to find, you don't search for keywords, but you search for things that you'd want to find. So for example, somebody talking about World War II in a way that's demeaning, and it'll literally pull up tweets that match that description. So that's an example of what I'm talking about there. Having semantic searching will allow me to be able to really narrow things down a little bit better. So I'm just waiting for that to happen until I resume this. But yeah, so far, like, I didn't really find many people that were like-minded. Obviously, my method was wrong, was flawed, as I had mentioned. So that was that. And then the last thing was I finished organizing everything. So I had allowed my Notion pages to just accumulate over time. It got so disorganized that I had like 87 pages in my sidebar. 87. And I had organized all of it. I finally had organized all of it. And the other problem that I had with Notion was that there was a whole bunch of things that I had just not categorized yet. And I was moving towards something called problem centering, which I might have mentioned in the past. And this problem centering had not been finished, so I went and finished it. The other thing that I did was that I created a backup system for all my files. So as I talked about, I used Backblaze. I now have created a whole thing where I have a continuous backup system on my MacBook with Time Machine and with my this hard drive that I have. I have a continuous backup system with my phone, and then I have a continuous backup system in my computer that I put everything to every like 2 weeks or so. So I've just like beautifully set up this nice system that makes me feel very, very good, because I think I mentioned like last video, the previous video, that I lost my phone and felt really bad. So now I won't have any more issues with that. And so I recategorized all the stuff. I spent a lot of time on that. Okay, so now we're in like the last quarter of this video. One of the interesting things before I get into the last quarter that I should probably talk about is that as I cycled out of my president role at this building in November or so, I still had not given a performance review to my general manager, the person that I pretty much liaise with. As a board, we hire the general manager to hire obviously other people and to just take care of the affairs of the co-op. And it was just so interesting being a part of or I should say, conducting this performance review. Because I was a part of the last year's performance review and I was just sitting there, but it was very different to actually conduct it myself. And it was so fascinating because I just had an eye on myself as it was happening, that I'm pretty much evaluating a 46-year-old, I don't actually know how old he is, a 40-year-old that has been at this co-op for like more than 15 years, has been in this position for more than 10 years, when I've only been here on the board for like 2.5 years, and I've been, let alone being president, for like 1 year, less than 1 year. And I just found that so wild how I was the one that was evaluating him. It made me, it just gave me a whole different like perspective of things, of how I should be thinking about managing people. And it was a very cool experience. It was very constructive. It was very nice. I think that just over time my skills in just management have just increased as I've gained more empathy and more first principles. I shouldn't say it that way. As I've gained more empathy and as I have thought more about things on my own from a first principle standpoint. Okay, so now let's get to the last quarter of the video. Let us talk about the big milestones that I think that, or I shouldn't even say milestones, I should say, let's talk about like the big things that by happening, it's just a huge indication that my life is heading towards a very, very good direction. So let's talk about that. There's 4 things. Like, these 4 things, I have a lot of, like, they're really important to me. They're more important than a lot of other things that people might care about, but I find this extremely important because it's these things that give me the confidence to live life like very, very confidently. So it's all insight related, by the way. So the first one, I realized this last month that I've spent so much time over-optimizing my life. And I'll explain to you what that means. I use a to-do list called Todoist. If I were to tell you how many tasks I have on Todoist, it would blow your mind. I have like 1,000 tasks that have either been queued for later, things that I want to do right now, etc. And if you were to just look at all those tasks, if I were to just tell you some of these tasks, I never realized how like a huge portion of them, like half of them, were either not important to me because they were just either intellectual curiosities that I didn't really care about later on. I only cared about it at the moment that I thought of them, or they were just over-optimizations. And both of those just aren't pragmatic to my goals or like my problems that I'm trying to solve. And so I'll give you some examples of this. On my to-do list, I had a task, for example, that said, because I tutor, for example, and this task is related to it, to create an AI or a machine learning algorithm to predict whether a student will be late. Create a bot that can analyze my time data and tell me when to be focused. Create a bot that automatically orders my tasks in a way that's optimal. These are 3 examples, in my opinion, complete over-optimizations. The amount of time spent creating the actual system or the bot or whatever, will be more, and sorry, I should be even more specific. The amount of time it's spent creating, operating, and maintaining the system will be more than just doing whatever it is that I'm trying to have the bot do. And that is something that I realized that I constantly did, constantly. And the other side of things, which I would still consider an over-optimization, but I call them intellectual curiosities, or also known as like window shopping, is like thinking about things when I'm not even in those situations, and it's not even relevant. And I realized that the reason as to why I put off tasks is because either it's an over-optimization and it's not like a burning desire, or I'm window shopping. I'm thinking of things that aren't related to my current situation. And I'll give you an example of 3 things that are intellectual curiosities. How to manage employees effectively. How to manage hundreds of people messaging you when you are famous. What would I do if I had no leverage, aka if I was homeless, with like no phone and shit? See, these are not bad to think about. Not bad to think about at all, right? It's important questions, but given the right situation. Right now, I am not even in a situation where I'm even going to be able to think about how to manage employees effectively, because I haven't actually had employees that report to me the same way, and I haven't had employees report to me, so I won't have the same knowledge that I will have to answer this question than I would have if I just answered it later. See, with the co-op, it's a little bit different because I don't see my employee every single day. I see them once a month, every board meeting. It's like very, very different, right? And so this all 3 of those that I just mentioned are important, but only when it comes, or when you know it's going to come. You see what I'm saying? So the 3 types of filters that I never just thought about was like, how relevant is this to my short-term and long-term goals? That's number 1. The other thing that I never asked myself was, like, how probable is it that what I'm thinking about or what I want to do as a task is even going to happen? And like, let's just run through these. How probable is it that I'm even going to get famous, where hundreds of people are going to message me? We don't even know if it's going to happen. So imagine if I spend 5-6 hours thinking about it and it never happens. And now multiply this by 100, because there might be 100 other tasks that might never happen that you think for 5-6 hours about. So that's the other thing that I never really considered. Like, how probable is it that it's going to happen? And imagine if it is probable and relevant. Is it relevant to do it now, or can it just be done later? Right? Like, these are things that I never asked myself. And as a result, what I did was, out of the 1,000 tasks that I had in my to-do list, I purged over 40% of them. 40% of them, not even necessary anymore. I thought to myself, if there's not even a time that I could think of when I'm going to do these tasks in the future, then I'm just going to delete them. And then if they arise, then they'll come up again. The tasks will come up again because it's important to look at them. And I had a whole list of problems that I also wanted to solve. Like, I had 130 problems that I listed that I wanted to solve, and I purged like 70% of those. And so another result that came out of this was I completely cleared the backlog of activities that I have. So what that means is that I always, in my to-do list or in my calendar, I always had a whole list of tasks, like a lot, like 10, 15 tasks that I wanted to do, or at least I thought I wanted to do, that I wanted to do. But I had never put it through these filters. And by putting it through these filters, or by really trying to understand like how really relevant it is, all of them just went away. Either I got them done at that moment, or they all just like got deleted, or they got scheduled for later. And that was, and let me tell you, I have always had a backlog of tasks, like tasks I should be doing, since like 7th grade, bro, maybe even 5th grade. And to tell you how freeing it is to just not have a backlog of tasks, I can't even explain it. I can't even explain how good it feels to have tasks, to not be in a situation where you have tasks that you should be doing that you're not doing because you're putting it off. I don't have that anymore, at least for now. And I predict I'm not going to have it anymore, though. That was the first realization, the first milestone. The second milestone, which is really related to it, is something called problem centering my life. Okay, before I even talk about this, let's talk about why I'm so happy and why it's so meaningful. Why I consider the first thing so important. The reason why I consider the first thing so important, this concept of not over-optimizing or window shopping, is that I finally will start working on things that I want to work on instead of working on things that I should be working on. Because if the backlog of tasks never exists, then the only things I'll be working on are things that I want to be working on, which is sick. Like there's what that means is that the self-conflict inevitably will just be lower. The baseline just goes down, which makes me very excited because there's way less to suffer, way less opportunity to suffer, way less stress. So that's the first thing. The next is the problem centering the PSF, which is the problem solving framework. And give me a second, I'm just gonna fix the curve. Okay, so I also, actually wait, give me a second. You know what, I don't know if that fan is very loud or not. Let me actually turn it off. So the next part is problem centering. Problem centering is something else that builds on top of what I just mentioned about not having a backlog of tasks, but it's even more powerful. What I've determined to be the fundamental reason as to why people are not able to be motivated enough to complete things that they should be completing is because it's not tied to a problem that they have. Most people have a problem with how they organize their life. It seems that most people structure their life into areas such as family, love life, friendships, career, health, whatever it is. And they try to nourish all of those areas. And they try to prioritize those, whatever, doesn't matter. The point is that it's not specific enough, right? Why would you nourish an area that's already nourished? It's like what's more important is what problems do you have in those areas, in whatever areas that you have, and just focus all in on those. See what I'm saying? And so what that means is if we're not able to have a clear idea of why we're doing the tasks, and how it relates to the problem that we're trying to solve in our life, then we will never be fully motivated to do it. And this problem centering, the way in which I've centered my workspace is now problem centered, where everything is based off of a problem. All the tasks that I do is based off of solving problems now that I have. So all the tasks come out of that. And I find that very fascinating, very cool. And the reason as to why this is important and meaningful is because, just think about it. Imagine having unlimited motivation to do all the tasks that you want to do, assuming that what I'm saying is true, right? Like, assuming that what I'm saying is true, that means that you will have unlimited motivation to just continue doing whatever it is that you feel like doing all the time. That's another thing that gives me a lot of excitement. The third thing, arguably the most important one, is something called assumptions drilling. So, for people that don't know me, for people that know me, I should say, they often hear me talk about how I care about finding the flawed assumptions in my life. I care about attaining full clarity of things by finding those flawed assumptions. And it's so crazy because if you pair the problem solving like framework that I've created for myself. And you basically assign this other framework of assumptions drilling that I created. And you merge them together. It's literally like a framework to become extremely self-aware. And I've gotten results from it too, which is why I'm so excited and happy from it, and so excited to share or talk about it. Assumptions drilling works like the following. All of our delusions, all of our flawed assumptions come from not being able to ground everything that we do into reality. People talk about, let's say, sincerity, or people talk about being disciplined. People talk about paying attention, or whatever it is. But do you really know what those words mean? And I'm not saying to give a definition to those words. What I'm saying is, what personal experiences do you have, and what personal experiences are you referencing in your mind unconsciously when you think of these words? Do you even have an idea of what those examples are? And when you write down those examples, how grounded are those examples in reality? Are you using an example and then offsetting the word that you're trying to offset the word you're trying to define into another scapegoat word? Are you scapegoating it into another word? Because that's often what happens, right? Like I say, if I say the word, it's gonna be very bad. I'm gonna butcher this so bad because I'm not able to come up with a good example of this. But if I, for example, say, what is judgment? And someone will say, well, judgment is like, imagine I say like, why does judgment happen, I should say. There you go, that's a better word. If I say, how does it work, or why does judgment happen? And what they do is that they say, well, judgment happens because you are making a conclusion about someone. Like, do you understand how funny that is? Because what you just did is that you took the word judgment and you just redefined it into a different set of words and didn't really explain anything. You've now scapegoated the word judgment into just making conclusions about things. And you could scapegoat making conclusions about things into something else. And it's only until you're able to ground everything into reality by giving examples of what actually happened where you're going to be able to actually define the word properly. But it's crazy because when you actually create the examples and you really try to analyze why those things happened, you start to understand something more nuanced than the very word that you thought was the word. So you thought, for example, that bravery was like this beautiful thing that people possess and they have this will that they can become more brave. But the moment you start noting all the examples of people being brave, you start to realize that the reason as to why they were brave was either because they were compelled to or because they had no other choice. And those are pretty much the same thing. So this is my point though. Assumptions drilling is just taking all the words, all your conclusions, and all the words, specifically the terms that you have, and grounding them into reality, and avoiding scapegoating the terms into other terms. And the reason as to why this works together with the problem-solving framework is because if everyone was to go and like think about all their assumptions and all that, they actually wouldn't be very motivated to think about all their assumptions because there's so many assumptions, right? There's so many assumptions, so many words that you've assumed in your life. There's a lot of energy to do that. But the moment you intersect it with all your problems, so imagine you want to solve problem X, but the only way to solve problem X is by knowing what these assumptions mean. Then you're able to link the reason as to why you have to know about these assumptions to a problem. And that gives you a good channel of motivation to actually do it. And that is what I realized, and that's what I've been implementing, and it's been very, very useful recently. And it's been just unbelievably beautiful, the amount of realizations that I've had. has been very exciting. Very, very exciting. So the reason why it's meaningful is just because now I am sort of like just super happy that so long as I just follow this, obviously following what I feel like doing, but just having this framework in my head, I will eventually solve all my problems and also become self-aware along the way. And that's all I wanted, right? That's all I want. The next part is something called, so the next milestone is the last one, something called sincere speaking. I realized a month ago that, so let's talk about this. I mentioned last video that I have a very big problem with people that are insincere. And what I define as sincerity here is just saying something or expressing something is different than what you actually feel. And I've by doing this whole assumption drilling thing I talked about, I finally have understood the root cause of insincerity. And it has allowed me to become more understanding of people that are insincere in specific situations. And I noticed within myself that even myself, I'm not speaking sincerely. Even in this video, I'm not speaking sincerely. To some degree. There might have been points where I might have spoken sincerely. But the point is what I mean by that is the following. Speaking sincerely is speaking accurately. Speaking accurately means whatever you feel in your mind, you describe exactly what that is. So for example, if I have made the conclusion that I hate Chinese food, as an example, that's not me saying the words I hate Chinese food is not accurate. Because what's real, what's accurate is I tried a Chinese restaurant maybe 2 or 3 times, the same one, let's say, or different ones in Toronto or whatever, and I didn't like those. And when I say I don't like Chinese food, it's not that I will not like them forever. It's that I currently don't like Chinese food. And here's the other thing. I also might be led to believe that I don't like Chinese food when in reality, I might actually like it in the future. I might actually like it. I'm basically restating the second point that I just mentioned, which is like, I don't currently like it. So the most sincere way of saying it, or the most accurate way of saying it, is instead of saying I don't like or I hate Chinese food, it's my experiences of having Chinese food currently make me not like. I shouldn't. Okay. I'm like trying to build this on the spot. That's why it's not working. I'm trying to find like a really, really good way of saying it. If I were to just say it like just how I feel right now, I would say my current experiences of having Chinese food have led me to not like it. Right, and then I would probably add have led me to currently not like it. Because what this explains is you're really describing how you feel and what actually happened with you. And the reason as to why this is so important is because I noticed that all of my interpersonal problems, whether big or small, have always come from a lack of being precise and also from a lack of speaking sincerely and accurately. If I, for example, tell someone that I don't like their idea about something, I'm trying to think of a better example. Oh, imagine I tell someone that they are acting a particular way, like they are acting immature, right? It's very different to say you are acting immature than to say I'm feeling feelings. It's almost like you feel whatever feelings that you feel of that immaturity. That's what you describe. It's like I feel resistance from what you're saying to me right now, because it almost makes you wonder. You see how it forces you to think of what does immaturity even mean here, right? Like, what is it that you really have a problem with? Why? Like, we might not be calling it immature. So obviously, right now, like I'm really really bad with giving the example, but hopefully I'm able to communicate what it is that I'm saying. So long as you're able to describe exactly what you have a problem with, there's almost no issue, because you're describing your problems. You're not describing their problems. Because at the end of the day, that's what you are describing. When you say someone's immature, at the end of the day, you're just describing how your reaction to their immaturity was. And so long as you're able to speak sincerely from the heart, then that means that you will have less chance of falling into an interpersonal problem because you're speaking sincerely. And the second is that you just naturally become more self-aware. Because as I tried to, for example, think of the immature, sincere example, I had a hard time. And it's because I realized right now that I didn't really understand what calling someone immature really meant for me. And so it forces you to become more self-aware. And so that's why it's meaningful for me, because it not only allows me to have more meaningful relationships with other people and to avoid conflict, that's unnecessary conflict, but it also allows you to build self-awareness. It's built in, which is great. Okay. There's a few more things that I want to get into, but I don't want this to get too long. Let me see. Yeah, this is 1 hour and 43 minutes. That's pretty big. Jesus. Okay, let's see. What am I gonna do? I just cover the. Okay. Recently, I have been working on an app that tries to focus on using AI to help people solve their problems and to see their assumptions. So everything I've just been describing about like solving problems and seeing your assumptions, seeing the flawed assumptions, I've realized that I actually have a very unique way of thinking about it, and that I can actually help people. But what I realized instead was that instead of doing it one-on-one, I can actually create an AI and train the AI to do and to look for what I'm looking for when I look for flawed assumptions. Now, the motivation behind this is that obviously you can create a company to make money. Recently, I came across this video by Daniel, not even a video, I came across this conversation or this snippet of a video when I watched it, of Daniel Schmachtenberger talking about how we're exponentially getting better and better at creating tools and technologies. And the assumption that he had here was that as you get exponentially better and better at creating tools, that magnifies the amount of impact of your decision making. So an example is, before when I had a knife and I wanted to kill someone, I can only kill one person, but now when I have an AK-47 or an AR-15, I can kill 100 more people. So it magnifies the impact of your decision making. Okay, great. And if I have a nuke, I can kill the whole world. Now he said that our level of decision making is not growing at the same rate as technology is growing, which means that if our level of decision making is stagnant and it's obviously flawed because people are dying, and the rate at which technology is improving is exponential, which also means that the rate of our impact of our decision making is exponential, that is a self-termination scenario. That's what he was saying. But what I think that he assumed was that technology could be used to improve your decision making. Not all technology is used as an extension of your decision making. That very technology could be used to improve it. And I thought that what I was about to create, this AI like assumptions finder, whatever you want to call it, an AI coach, an AI therapist, whatever you want to call it, would be able to do this, would be able to would be able to at scale improve people's consciousness levels. So I noticed that if the world is headed towards disaster and we're all gonna die if we don't do anything about it, then what's the point of making all this money? What's the point in like understanding when I'm gonna die very, very quickly, or maybe in like the next 10 years or 20 years, if there's a self-termination scenario that happens, such as like nuclear war. And there's so many more ways of dying other than nuclear war. I remember that was another thing that was mentioned. There's like a dozen different ways, especially with GPT-3. An example is like, you can literally create a drone very, very easily with a camera on it, attach a camera on it, and code it with GPT-3 to go and recognize and use facial recognition technology to go fly around a specific area, and once they see this face, to like shoot them. And it's like very, very easy. And you can do this with like thousands of drones and just clean up a whole population. And so the idea here though is, if you're not contributing to humanity by helping them make better decisions, or if you're not contributing to humanity by creating tools that make it easier to create tools to help people make decisions, then you're effectively wasting time. That was one of the conclusions that I had. And so I thought, okay, if we create this, it's almost like this is the most important thing to be creating. Not only is the most important thing to be creating, but it would reduce the cost of the current solution, which is like therapy or talking to someone that actually is an expert of the mind. It would reduce the cost of therapy and coaching by like 20 times, 20x, order of magnitude, right? And I realized that I actually am like the perfect person for the job for this, because I have been cultivating epiphanies for like 7 years now when I did my tutoring. Like I've done 2,000 hours of one-on-one cultivating epiphany. And I don't know if many other people that are creating products right now with AI have that level of experience and that level of clear assumptions. Like I also think that out of everyone that I've ever met, I have a lot of very, very clear assumptions that aren't flawed, or that I've found out a lot of flawed assumptions that a lot of people haven't found about of their own. And so I think that it makes me have a competitive advantage of how to perfectly fine-tune the AI, and I say fine-tune generally, not specifically here, how to fine-tune the AI in a way in which it can actually help people properly. And I can also get clarity from this myself, so it gives me value as well. And obviously I'm going to be willing to dedicate a huge chunk of my life to this. And so just by seeing this idea, it just clicked to me that this is what I should be doing right now. This is the product that I should be working on. And this is something that I think we can get funding on. And it has a huge ceiling of growth. It's billions of dollars worth of growth. The fundamental assumption, by the way, that I think that most people don't have, but I have, but which I think is true, which I'm 100%, whoever's ever watching this, not that I expect you to ever be watching this, but if you are watching this and you're listening to what I'm about to say, if you can challenge me on this, please do, because this is the fundamental assumption that's guiding my whole life, and I wouldn't want to live my whole life with this being false, right? The fundamental assumption that I'm living my whole life by, and that I'm going to be coding this AI into, would be that all of your suffering and all of your problems come from a lack of clarity of those problems. And to extend on that, a flawed set of assumptions that you have about those problems. And so I basically have to still build it out. It's going to be very, very difficult to do it. I have to talk to more people and employ my own strategy, that I currently already have myself, to see how to code it, because I have to formalize it in a way in which the AI can understand. Most of the work that I'm doing is intuitive, so I have to almost talk to people act like their therapist, and then pay attention to what I'm doing. Maybe record the conversations and see what to do from there. So that's what I'm focused on. That's very exciting. It would be super cool if I could just make an impact on people. If I could make this free, meaning that if it meant that I could reach the whole world and it actually would have an impact, I would 100% make this free. The only problem is that this shit is like so expensive to build, because there's so much chaining going on. That's the other thing. Like, it's not just going to be like one GPT-3 response. It's going to be like a GPT-3 response to another one, to another one, to another one. That's going to be like extremely, extremely expensive. It's going to cost like at least $100 a month, probably. Yeah. Anyways, so, and the cost, by the way, is like $75 per month. So to make profit, yeah, assuming the market pays for it. Anyways, so that's that. I've been focused recently, so let's talk about the plans for the future. I was planning on getting into like these red flags stuff, which basically lists all of the weaknesses that I have. But I might get into it in the next video. I have a lot of time. So the plan now is to see what my body wants to do, and just go and do those things. Right now, my body has felt like just looking into all of my weaknesses, which I just described. I have a whole bunch of weaknesses that I've been, like 15 of them. And I've just been thinking about what lack of clarity I have from those and getting more clarity. And I've actually gotten a lot more clarity on those in the last few days, just a week. And we'll see what my body wants to do after that's done. I think that naturally what I'm going to want to do is to work on this AI app. So far, I'm thinking of calling it Insightful Guru. There's other like names like Socratic Coach, Socratic Guru, like Cranium Coach. I don't know. There's so many different things. And so I'm going to be probably working on that, and we'll see what I want to do after that. As I've problem-centered everything, the main problems that I'm going to be working on are like just how to achieve. Oh, I just realized there's this one thing I haven't mentioned, which is that there's a goal now that I want to achieve that I probably have not mentioned before, and it unites all of my previous goals together into one. And the way in which the way in which it works is the following. All human beings, to my knowledge, have done very exceptional things in their lives. Great. But there's 5 pillars, or I should just say 5 things, 5 dimensions that human beings have individually probably perfected, but they've never done all 5 of them at once. The 5 are having no self-conflict, being able to solve a problem through creating a product that's non-educational, so creating an actual physical product that directly provides value, is one of the most charismatic people, physically fit and healthy, and is an expert at a creative art. So people have been able to achieve one or many of them, but they've never been able to achieve all of them. So let's talk about it. Someone that's had no self-conflict, this is the one that's like the most rare. So to have no self-conflict in and of itself is rare, let alone being able to have the rest of all the other characteristics, such as solving a problem to creating a non-educational product, being extremely charismatic, being physically fit on top of that, and being an expert in creative arts, like knowing how to play instruments and dancing and acting and whatever. So if you look at, for example, people that have no self-conflict, it's all like those Indian sages or the Zen Buddhist monks, etc. If you look at all the people that have solved the problem through creating a new non-educational product, it's all of the people that are top businessmen like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, etc. If you look at the most charismatic people, it's all the people in the entertainment industry. Like the people I think about are, and I wrote these down, people I think about are like Jamie Foxx, Stephen A. Smith I think is pretty interesting. There's Jim Carrey, right? Gordon Ramsay, Russell Brand. These are people that have extreme charisma. And then there's the people that are physically fit and healthy and this is like really not a huge bar that you have to get to, but it is one of them. And then being an expert in creative art, it's extremely interesting. Like there's like the Hans Zimmer of the world. There's like the Juice WRLD, which are experts at freestyling. There's the Tony Robbins, who have a really, really good idea of like NLP and like, I don't know exactly what to call it, but anyone that knows about Tony Robbins knows what I'm talking about. The Eckhart Tolles, the Christopher Nolans at creating beautiful films, the Chris Brown for dancing, the Leonardo DiCaprios for acting. That's the type of experts in creative arts that I'm talking about. Now, I just described to you a bunch of people. None of those people have been able to do all 5. I think I can do all 5. And that's the goal that I have for my life. And that's what I want to optimize for now. And that's me actually following my body too, not even optimizing for like conceptually. This is just what I want to do. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Recently, I've been thinking about the difference between phase 1 and phase 2, I call it. Phase 1 is like this survival mode. I call it survival mode, when in reality it's not, but I feel in survival mode. It's almost like I can't really explore anything. I can't really do anything until I achieve a high enough leverage, until I can make enough money or be at a point where I know that I'll never need to go back to this situation again. That's what it is. And also being able to spend money on whatever I want. Like that level of leverage is phase 1. So that includes like knowing your core assumptions to be able to work really well and not get in your own way, being able to create a product or to create some type of value in the world to get paid, and yeah. Then there's phase 2, which is exploring, trying different foods, going to different places, dating, getting a car finally, and just like doing whatever I want. This is something that I've just been so attracted to recently. Like I've just been wanting to do it so much, just to get a piece of experience of life, because I feel like I have not exposed myself to a lot of things. You know, like I never drank before until last year, and I only did it once. I haven't really like I haven't had much experiences before. I haven't actually dated that much, dude. Like, yeah, like I don't know what it feels like to literally like look into someone's eyes, like lying down and looking into someone's eyes like for an extended period of time. Never had that. Never experienced that. I've never like been to a club. I've never tried a lot of foods. I've never been to a lot of places. I haven't watched like many things, like whether it's movies or TV shows. I've just been like I haven't spent money on a lot of things. I just haven't been exposed to a lot of life, and I want to get exposed to it. And once I get the leverage, then I'll do it. But that's just something I've been craving lately. Just wanted to mention that. Other than that, that's a gargantuan update. I think this is like 3 times as long as any video I've ever done. So, yeah. Hope to update everybody soon. Hopefully, hope to put another video out in like 2 or so months after this. Peace out.